This report is about difference between oral communication and written communication. First, words play crucial role in communication process to transmit the message in the way it is intended to be conveyed. So words as transmitter of meaning, words are the primary method we use to express our thoughts, feelings, and ideas. They allow us to describe, explain, and share what we mean. If the right words are chosen, the message will be understood the way it was intended. Second, when words are used in the process of communication, it is known as a verbal communication. Verbal transfer of information can be performed orally or in written form. So verbal communication means using words to convey a message. This can be done through speaking or writing. The main thing is that it's all about using language to share ideas, whether you're having a face-to-face conversation, giving a presentation, sending an email, or writing a report. Third, oral communication is the oldest means of communication, which is most commonly used as a medium for the exchange of information. It involves gathering or disseminating information through spoken words. Example of this is the child. She first learned the oral communication or the verbal communication rather than the written communication, because the oral communication is the easier way to learn the words. So last, oral communication, on the other hand, is a formal means of communication wherein message is carefully drafted and formulated in written form. It is kept a source of reference or legal record. So oral communication isn't just about a chit-chat in a formal setting. It means the message you're delivering has been thoughtful, prepared, and articulated. This ensures clarity and precision. Written forms of this communication are usually archived to serve as reference or legal documents. Example, meeting, formal speeches, and agreements, business and agreements. So this is the comparison chart. Basic communication, oral communication, and written communication. So, basic communication, meaning exchange of ideas, information, or message through spoken words is oral communication. So, example of this is phone calls, speeches. This is using our oral communication. And for the written communication, interchange of message, opinions, and information in written forms. Printed form is written communication. So this refers sharing messages, opinions, and information. Example of this is letters, emails, and reports. Next is what is it? In oral communication, communication with the help of words, of mouth. Meaning, it is involves speaking or talking direct to people, communicate face-to-face, other than, for example, phone calls. In written communication, communication with the help of text. Meaning, the message is shared using written words in the form of text. Example of this is the text messages, letters, or emails. So next, literacy. In oral communication, not required at all. And for written communication, necessary for communication. Of course, in oral communication, literacy is not required at all, but in written communication is necessary for communication. Next, transmission of message. In oral communication, speedy, and the written communication is slow. Of course, in oral communication, we can react in the face-to-face, so that's why it's speedy. In the written communication, we can't react or reply immediately. So next, proof, no record of communication in there. In written communication, proper records of communication are present. Of course, in oral communication, there's no proof in there because it's verbally transmitted. And written communication records of there are records of communication. For example, text messages, letters, or sending emails. So next, feedback. In oral communication, immediate feedback can be given. In written communication, feedback takes time. So yes, of course, oral communication can immediate feedback because your chit chat face to face. In written communication, it takes time for the feedbacks. So next, revision before delivering the message. In oral communication, not possible. In written communication, possible. So, of course, in oral communication, there's not possible that revision of delivering messages. And for the written communication, it is possible to revise the message. Next, receipt of nonverbal cues. In oral communication, yes. And written communication, no. So in oral communication, yes, there's, for example, body gestures. Unlike the written communication, there's no body gestures in it. Next, probability of misunderstanding. Oral communication, very high, and the written communication, quite less. Yes, in oral communication, it is more possible the misunderstanding, not unlike the written communication.
Written communication is when you share information by writing or printing. It's very common in business because it's formal and reliable. You can easily refer to it later and it helps avoid misunderstanding. However, it can take a long time and you don't know if the person you sent it to has read it. So, written communication, it's formal and reliable. It's used for um, official purpose like contracts, agreements, and reports. It's create a record of what was said and agree. It use clarity and accuracy. Documentary, for example, emails, letters, text messages, reports, and memos. Differences between oral communication and written communication. So first is oral communication is speaking and written communication is writing. Number two is written communication requires literacy, oral communication doesn't. So you need to know how to read and write to understand a letter, but you can understand someone talking to you even if you don't know how to read and write. Number three is written communication create a record, oral communication doesn't. So you can save an email or a text messages, but you can't save a conversation you had with someone else unless you record it. Fourth is oral communication is faster than written communication. So it's faster to tell someone to pass the salt than to write them a note. Fifth is you can take back spoken words but you can edit written messages. So if you say something you regret, you can't unsay it. But if you write something you don't like, you can always change it before you send it. Sixth is misunderstanding are more likely in oral communication than written communication. Seven is you get immediate feedback in oral communication but not in written communication.
Good evening, everyone. I am Judy Ann Manaram, your reporter for the Universal Grammar by Noam Chomsky. Universal grammar consists of a set of unconscious constraints that let us decide whether a sentence is correctly formed. This mental grammar is not necessarily the same for all languages, but according to Chomsky theorists, the process by which in any given language certain sentences are perceived as correct while others are not is universal and independent of meaning. So, according to Noam Chomsky, universal grammar is mga unconscious constraint na siya, diba? Set of unconscious constraint nga kita maka-decide whether ang sentence is tama ba siya pagka-form or not. So, kani nga mental grammar, kani siya nga part is dili siya same sa tanan languages. Pero according sa kang Chomsky, kani nga process in any given language, certain sentences are perceived or nagtuo ta nga correct while sa lain din nga language is dili. So na siya lahi-lahi nga na siya independent meaning. Next is observation that support the Chomsky view of language. Until Chomsky propounded his theory of universal grammar in 1960s, the empiricist school that had dominated thinking about language since the Enlightenment held that when children came into the world, their minds were like a blank slate. Chomsky theory had the impact of a large rock thrown into this previously tranquil, undisturbed pound of empiricism. Subsequent research in the cognitive science, which combined the tool of psychology, linguistics, computer science, and philosophy, soon lent further support to the theory of universal grammar. For example, researchers found the babies only a few days old could distinguish the phonemes of any language and seemed to have an innate mechanism for the processing the sound of the human voice. So, kani sila, mo sila ang mga nagsuporta sa theory ni Noam Chomsky. Sa katong pagsulti ni gi-propound na ni Chomsky ang iyahang theory, ang katong empiricist school, ilang na-enlight sila kay, di ba, ang mga bata, gikan pagkabata nila is, ang ilang mind is blank lang siya. Or kanang, wala pa sulod, di ba, ang utok sa bata. Kung unsa lang, di ba, ang ilang madungog sa ilang palibot, mao ang ilang ma-apply. So, diri pod katong research sa cognitive science nga nag-combine sa psychology, linguistics, computer science, and philosophy, nag-support pod sila ani nga theory kay sa ila pa example nakita sa mga researcher nga katong mga babies nga pila pa lang kaadlaw is ma-distinguish na nila ang phonemes sa bisag unsa nga language. Unya, murag masundog na nila ang sounds ana niya. The next is Chomsky and the evolution of language. Many authors adopting the approach of evolutionary psychology believe that language has been shaped by natural selection. In their view, certain random genetic mutation were thus selected over many thousands of years to provide certain individuals with a decisive adaptive advantage. Whether the advantage that languages provide was in coordinating hunting parties, warning of danger, or communicating with sexual partners remain uncertain. So, there is a Chomsky an evolution of language. Daghan nga mga author nga ilang gi-adapt ang kani nga approach sa psychology nga ni-believe sila nga ang language is gi-shape siya by natural selection. Sa ilang view, na mga certain random genetic mutation sa tao na naselect siya sa over many thousand of years para maka-provide og individual nga naay decisive adaptive advantage. So, bisag kanang advantage sa that language provide, ma-coordinate siya sa hunting property parties, warning of danger, or communicating with sexual partners remain uncertain or dili pa siya sure. Then, however, Chomsky, for his part, diba, does not see our linguistic faculties as having originated from any particular selective pressure, but rather as a sort of fortuitous accident. He bases this view, among other things, on studies which found that recursively, the ability to embed one clause inside another, as in the person who was singing yesterday had a lovely voice, might be the only specifically human component of language. According to the authors of these studies, recursivity originally developed not to help us communicate, but rather to help us solve other problems connected, for example, with numerical quantification or social relation. And humans did not become capable of complex language until recursivity was linked with other motor and perceptual abilities needed for this purpose. Thus, recursivity would meet the definition of spandrel offered by Stephen Jay Gould. According to Chomsky and his colleagues, there is nothing to indicate that this linkage was achieved through natural selection. They believe that it might simply be the result of some other kind of neuronal reorganization. Then, next is the minimalist program. In 1990s, Chomsky research focused on what he called the minimalist program, which attempt to demonstrate that the brain's language faculties are the minimum faculties that could be expected, given certain external conditions that are imposed on us independently. In other words, Chomsky began to place less emphasis on something such as universal grammar embedded in human brain, and more emphasis on a large number of plastic cerebral circuits, and along with this plasticity would come an infinite number of concepts. The brain would then proceed to associate sound and concept, and the rules of grammar that we observe would in fact be only consequences or side effects of the way that language works. Analogously, we can, for example, use rules to describe the way a muscle operates, but these rules do nothing but explain what happens in the muscle. They do not explain the mechanism that the brain uses to generate this rule. Then next is the criticism of Chomsky theories. So, diba, in every theory, dili lang kay mga nag-support, nagid na mga criticism nga mahitabo. So, mo ni sila mga nag-criticize sa theories ni Chomsky, which is Skinner or Piaget. For whom, according sa iyaha, for whom language is constructed solely through simple interaction with the environment. This latter behaviorist model, kato ng behaviorist, kung saan ba, diba? In which the acquisition of language is nothing but a byproduct of general cognitive development based on sensory-motor interaction with the world. Evolutionary biologists have undermined them with the proposition that it may be only the brain's general abilities that are pre-organized. These biologists believe that to try to understand language, we must approach it not from the standpoint of syntax, but rather from the evolution and the biological structures that have resulted from it. Then third is according to Philip Lieberman, for example, language is not an instinct encoded in the cortical network of a language organ, but rather a learned skill based on the functional language system, distributed across numerous cortical and subcortical structure. Though Lieberman does not recognize that human language is by far the most sophisticated form of animal communication, he does not believe that it is a qualitatively different form, as Chomsky claims. Lieberman sees no need to posit a quantum leap in evolution or a specific area of the brain that would have been the set of this innovation. On the contrary, he says that language can be described as a neurological system composed of several specific functional abilities. Then, this is the fourth one, I think. Terence Deacon. It, according to him, it is the neurical circuits of this system and that same language organ that constitute a genetically predetermined set that limits the possible characteristic of a language. Generative semantics, developed by the linguist George Lakoff of the University of California at Berkeley, in contrast to Chomsky, in contrast no, for whom syntax is independent of such things as meaning, context, knowledge, and memory. Lakoff shows that semantics, context, and other factors that come into play in the rules that govern syntax. In addition, metaphor, which earlier authors saw as a simple linguistic device, become for Lakoff a conceptual construct that is essential and central to the development of thought. Next is the historical background. Universal grammar theory emerged as a response to the behaviorist perspective dominant in psychology and linguistics during the mid-20th century. Behaviorists like B.F. Skinner believed that all human behavior, including language, could be explained through conditioning and environmental influences. Chomsky's groundbreaking work, such as his 1957 book Syntactic Structures, challenged the behaviorist view by arguing that the creativity and complexity of human language cannot be explained solely through stimulus-response associations. He posited that there must be an innate, biologically determined component of language acquisition. Next is the core principle and concepts. In its hypothesis, this is the cornerstone of universal grammar theory in the idea that humans are born with innate capacity of language. So, muna siyang in its hypothesis. The next is the universal principle. Universal grammar suggests that there are universal linguistic principles and structures that are common to all human languages. These principles are believed to be hardwired in the human brain and form the basic for language acquisition. They are thought to include rules governing syntax which is sentence structures, morphology, word formation, and semantics, which is the meaning. The next is the poverty of stimulus. Chomsky introduced the poverty of the stimulus argument, which asserts that the linguistic input children receive is often insufficient and ambiguous to account for the grammatical knowledge they acquire. Universal grammar, according to this view, fills in the gaps and guides language development. The next is the parametric variation. While there are universal principles, universal grammar also allows for variation among languages. Chomsky proposed that languages differ by setting specific parameters within the universal grammar framework. The next is the modularity of mind. Universal grammar is closely tied to Chomsky's broader concept of the modularity of mind. This suggests that language is a distinct cognitive module of a system within a human mind, separate from other cognitive processes. This modularity implies that language acquisition follows a unique and specialized path. So this is all my report. Good evening. Thank you.